The Toothpaste Millionaire, Chapter 10. A gross mistake. The auction was where I made what my father calls a gross mistake. It was held at the Pulaski Brothers warehouse in downtown Cleveland. In the room where the auction was held, there were hundreds of cartons stacked around the walls, and a lot of things you don't usually see for sale, like dentist chairs and fire hydrants. I guess that's because they aren't retail items. I didn't see any coffins or Ferris wheels. The day I was at Pulaski Brothers, they were selling odd lots of hardware and miscellaneous pharmaceutical supplies. The people at the auction were mostly middle-aged men. Very few women and no kids except me. A lot of the men seemed to know each other. From listening to their conversations, it sounded as though they came to Pulaski Brothers auctions every Saturday. I felt a little out of place until I saw somebody I knew. It was Vince from Vince's Army and Navy, where I got the nylon for my saddlebags. Vince did remember me at first, but he was very nice and said, why didn't I sit down beside him? While we were waiting for the auction to begin, he bought me a cream soda. I asked Vince what he planned to buy at the auction. Grommets, Vince said. Oh, I said. They're a hardware item, Vince said. You use them on tents or boats. Vince said most of the men at the auction had small stores like his where they sold odd lots of things. I'd never heard of odd lots before. They're a little like odds and ends, but there are a lot of them. They seem to be things that are left over when a business goes out of business, and they're apt to be pretty odd, like grommets. Vince explained to me how the auction worked. Every item to be auctioned had a number. The auctioneer sold about 50 items an hour. Vince asked one of the Pulaski brothers what number the aluminum tubes were. They were number 76, so I had quite a wait. I knew from going to auctions with my mother that there was one thing you had to watch out for. You can spend all your money on something you don't need before the thing you really need comes up for sale. When the auction started, I was on guard. I had a chance to buy a whole box of dog collars for $1.25. But I just sat tight. Vince bought several things. The grommets and a box of pittons. A pitton is something rock climbers use. He also bought a barrel full of links for bike chains. He got the whole barrel for what 6 links would have cost at a hardware store. It was such a bargain, he gave me a handful for free. Finally, the auctioneer got to the tubes. Item number 76, aluminum tubes, he announced. High-quality tubes manufactured by Perfect Packaging Products. Never been used. Suitable for cosmetics, shaving creams, shampoos, foods, household cements, lubricants, oil paints, leather softeners, polishes, insecticides, dentifrices. I wish the auctioneer would stop reading off all the things you could use the tubes for. I hadn't spotted anybody at the auction who looked like he might be looking for toothpaste tubes, but with all those other things you could use tubes for, I was afraid the auctioneer would have everybody wanting to buy them. So, let's go, said the auctioneer. Aluminum tubes, 50 gross. How much am I bid by the gross? Bidder takes the lot. tried to remember how much a gross was. Something to do with a dozen. 50 dozen would be 600 tubes. I hadn't planned to buy that many tubes for Rufus. Couldn't I just bid for a couple of gross? I whispered to Vince. No, you got to buy the whole lot, Vince said. Who'll bid 5 cents a gross? The auctioneer was asking. A man in the front row raised his hand. And who'll give me 6 cents? The auctioneer said. I did some quick figuring. 6 cents a dozen would be 2 tubes for a penny, which would be a bargain. If the price didn't go too high, maybe I could afford to buy 600 tubes. Quickly, I put up my hand. 6 cents from the little lady in the third row, the auctioneer said. I looked around for the little lady. Vince nudged me. He means you. 6 cents is your bid. And now 7 cents, the auctioneer was saying. Who'll say 7 cents? The man in the front row was still bidding. Got 7 cents, the auctioneer said happily. Who'll give 8 cents? I will, I called out. I only had to signal quietly with my hand, but I was afraid the auctioneer might not see me. 8 from the little lady, he announced. Now I want 9 cents. Who'll give 9? The man who was bidding looked around to see who was running up the price. He gave me a sharp look. Then he motioned to the auctioneer that he'd go 9. 10, I yelled, without even waiting for the auctioneer to ask. I guess that scared the other bidder. Vince said I sounded so determined the guy figured I was ready to run the price up to 79 cents if necessary. Anyway, he shrugged to the auctioneer that he was finished bidding. All through? The auctioneer asked everybody, although there had been only the 2 of us bidding on the tubes. Everybody all through. Well then, 50 gross aluminum tubes sold to the little lady for 10 cents a gross. That's going to run you $5, Vince said. You got enough money with you? I did. Though I hadn't planned to spend that much on Rufus's present, I would have to economize on James' birthday next month. Maybe I'd give him a couple of jars of toothpaste. Anyway, you got a good buy, Vince said. I thought so too. 600 tubes wasn't really so many, considering that Rufus got more than 600 orders from that one appearance on the Joe Smiley show. It wasn't until I took my bike around to the back of the warehouse to pick up the tubes that I discovered my mistake. One of the Pulaski brothers wheeled out 5 big cartons on a hand truck. Here you go, he said. Are all those mine? I asked. I hadn't expected the boxes to be so big. 50 gross is a lot of tubes, Mr. Pulaski said. What will you do with 7,200 tubes anyway? 7,200, I said. You mean you didn't know how many tubes to a gross? Mr. Pulaski said. Well, sort of, I said. But as my father keeps telling me, sort of knowing isn't exactly the same as exactly knowing.